Picture this: the quiet, windswept Scottish Highlands. Rolling green hills stretch as far as the eye can see. Suddenly, a towering new wind turbine rises above the mist, blades slicing the air with silent determination. Now imagine this turbine is not alone, but one of dozens, each a century in Britain's boldest bet yet. The massive expansion of wind power, racing to outpace climate change, rising energy bills, and global uncertainty. But behind the headlines celebrating clean energy and green jobs, there's a deeper question. Can Britain's wind revolution actually deliver on its promises? Or are there risks lurking just below the surface that could shake the entire economy? Today we'll dive deep into the rise of onshore wind in the UK, the enormous hopes pinned on projects like Strathy South, and the high-stakes conflict between ambition, technology, economics, and reality. By the end of this story, you'll see why the future of British energy, and perhaps the next decade of its economy, stands on a knife edge. Let's start with what's actually happening on the ground right now. In the far north of Scotland, construction has just begun on what will soon become one of Britain's newest and most talked about renewable energy projects, the Strathy South wind farm. SSE, a major player in UK energy, greenlit this $400 million project at the end of 2024, kicking off early works at a remote site in Sutherland. When complete, Strathy South will feature 35 massive turbines, each supplied, installed, and commissioned by industry leader Vestas. Combined, they'll deliver 208 megawatts of clean power, enough to supply nearly 200,000 British homes every single year. That's not just a tech showcase, it's a cornerstone of the UK government's Clean Power 2030 action plan, a sweeping mission to secure the country's energy future with homegrown renewables. Michael Shanks, UK Energy Minister, didn't mince words when celebrating the project's groundbreaking. Delivering more onshore wind across the country is at the heart of our mission to becoming a clean energy superpower, creating highly skilled jobs, kickstarting growth, and protecting households from future fossil fuel price shocks. Sounds like victory, right? But look closer, and you'll see the real story is more complicated, more urgent, and filled with massive stakes. Britain is in the midst of a colossal energy transformation. By 2030, the government wants to see at least 50 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity and dramatic increases in onshore wind as well. Scotland in particular is racing ahead. It could even exceed its 20 gigawatts onshore wind target by 2030, possibly reaching nearly 25 gigawatts. As of spring 2025, the UK boasts about 15.7 gigawatts of operational onshore wind, with projects like Strathy South nudging that total ever higher. How did we get here? For more than a decade, Britain has been weaning itself off fossil fuels, driven by the urgent need to cut emissions, reduce its exposure to wild swings in international gas prices, and create a more secure, self-reliant energy system. The Contracts for Difference (CFD) scheme, a government-backed guarantee, has been central to this transformation, giving renewable developers a stable price for their electricity output and encouraging billions in investment. Community benefit funds, a lesser-known but powerful force, have further sweetened the deal. These funds channel an estimated $75 million every year back into local communities near onshore wind projects. The result? New infrastructure, upgrades, and a stake in the green revolution for people living next to these giant turbines. By 2023, wind energy was already generating nearly a third of the UK's electricity. That year alone, wind produced nearly 83 terawatt-hours, TWh, of clean power. In fact, the entire renewable electricity mix grew by more than 6.5% between 2023 and 2024, with wind, solar, biomass, and hydro now accounting for almost 43% of all British electricity. And it's not just about electricity, it's about jobs, thousands of them. At the height of construction, Strathy South will support up to 125 full-time roles, feeding vital cash into the Scottish and UK supply chains. It's about innovation, with Vestas supplying turbines at ever greater scales and efficiency. It's about a new economic narrative that frames Britain as a clean energy leader, not just a consumer of imported oil and gas. But none of this happens in a vacuum. Each gigawatt of wind power added is another piece in a sprawling, interconnected web of challenges and opportunities. And the people at the heart of this transition know just how high the stakes have become. Heather Donald, SSE Renewables Director of Onshore Wind, Solar, and Battery, captured this tension perfectly. As we look to develop a clean, homegrown, secure energy system, the scale and impact of onshore wind projects like Strathy South cannot be underestimated. But while headlines trumpet progress, there are mounting obstacles and tough questions, ones that will define not just the energy transition, but the very shape of Britain's future economy. Let's pull back the curtain. First, the economics. Wind power has become shockingly cheap, sometimes even undercutting the price of electricity on wholesale markets. For British households and businesses hammered by years of spiraling energy bills, renewables offer a tantalizing promise. Break the link with volatile fossil fuel prices, once and for all. As Renewable UK puts it, renewable energy provides a low-cost, secure alternative to volatile international gas markets, enhancing energy independence. But there's a catch. The energy grid wasn't designed for massive, intermittent flows of wind and solar. The more renewables you have, the harder it becomes to balance supply and demand, especially when the wind drops or the sun disappears. This is the main conflict that policymakers, investors, and communities are wrestling with right now. Britain is pouring billions into wind. Strathy South is just one example. But to truly unlock the benefits, the country must upgrade its entire energy system, from transmission lines to battery storage and everything in between. Dara Vyas, CEO of Energy UK, warns, meeting clean power goals requires tackling barriers and delays, such as speeding up planning and grid connections. Then there's the political chessboard. While wind and solar get lots of love, nuclear power still looms large, with some in government arguing that a truly secure energy system needs both. The problem? Nuclear projects are notoriously slow and expensive. Megan Amundsen of Scottish Renewables is blunt. Achieving onshore wind net zero goals hinges on fulfilling onshore wind sector deal commitments, including streamlined planning. Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats, pushes even further. Prioritize onshore wind investments over nuclear plans to reduce energy bills and enhance energy security. It's become a tug of war over where to invest, how fast to move, and how to maintain public trust. Professor Claire Corkill from Sheffield University highlights yet another sticking point. Safe nuclear waste storage is a complex and costly issue, requiring long-term solutions and careful planning. But pushback doesn't just come from politicians or rival industries. Some local communities, while benefiting from wind farm funding, have grown wary of landscape changes or noise. Meanwhile, delays in planning approvals and connecting new capacity to the grid threaten to slow progress at precisely the moment the country is supposed to be accelerating. The UK's ambitions are vast. Success would mean cleaner air, lower bills, global leadership in cutting-edge technology, and tens of thousands of new jobs. Miss the mark, though, and Britain faces the risk of energy shortages, higher costs, and lost credibility as a frontrunner in the global green economy. And then there's the global context. As the world's biggest economies ramp up their own renewable build-outs, the race is on to secure supply chains, skilled workers, and the most advanced technologies. For the UK, getting ahead, or falling behind, could reshape its economic destiny for decades to come. Already there are warning lights on the dashboard. Delays in grid expansion, supply chain bottlenecks, and the threat of community backlash hang over the sector. If projects like Strathy South stumble, could Britain's entire wind strategy unravel? And still, a bigger question looms. Achieving clean power by 2030 will be genuinely transformational for the UK energy system, benefiting households and the economy, says Sean Spears of Green Alliance. But what if the hard-won progress of the last decade is threatened by political gridlock, rising costs, or even unexpected opposition from the very communities these projects are meant to serve? Imagine it. Millions of pounds invested, 200,000 homes counting on new clean power, and a government declaring itself a clean energy superpower. Yet behind the scenes, the clock is ticking. Can Britain actually deliver on its wind-powered promises, or will the collision of policy, public sentiment, and economic reality leave the nation's energy future hanging in the balance? In the second half of this story, we'll answer the burning question. What will it really take for wind power and bold projects like Strathy South, not just to survive, but to thrive and reshape the UK's energy destiny? And are we prepared for the fallout if they don't? In the windswept highlands where Strathy South is taking shape, the turbines are more than steel and blades. They're symbols of hope, but also of uncertainty. The story of Britain's wind revolution is balanced on a knife's edge, and what happens next will ripple across generations. Let's look forward. What does the future hold? Brilliant success, bruising stumbles, or something in between? Imagine Britain in 2030. If projects like Strathy South reach their full potential, we could be living in a country where nearly every home flicks on the lights with clean, homegrown energy. That's not just a green fantasy. The UK's operational onshore wind capacity hit 15.7 gigawatts in April 2025, and Scotland alone is on track to potentially blow past its 20-gigawatt target, maybe reaching 25. Wind already supplies 30% of Britain's electricity, a figure that could soar even higher. But this optimistic future isn't guaranteed. Experts like Megan Amundsen of Scottish Renewables warn that everything depends on delivering real reforms, streamlining planning permissions and cutting grid red tape. Without that, the wind industry faces a bottleneck, where dozens of approved projects languish for years, strangled by paperwork and outdated infrastructure. In one scenario, the UK government's Clean Power 2030 action plan becomes a reality. Offshore giants like the Berwick Bank project feed power to millions. Onshore farms like Strathy South pepper the landscape, and families across the country see energy bills stabilize, no longer at the mercy of international gas prices. Jobs in construction and maintenance boom, local supply chains flourish, and annual community benefit funds swell, $75 million a year currently, but that could skyrocket. But there's another path. Public opposition hardens, with vocal groups lobbying against further turbine construction. Delays in grid connections mean freshly built turbines stand motionless, waiting months or even years to be plugged in. Investment hesitates. The risk is real. If barriers aren't tackled, Britain could miss its clean energy targets, leaving it exposed to fossil fuel price shocks and the uncertainties of a carbon-constrained world. Changing weather patterns and unpredictable power surges also pose technical challenges. As more wind hits the grid, stability becomes trickier. Without enough energy storage, blackouts could threaten the progress made. The answer? Massive investment in storage technology, from advanced batteries to pumped hydro, innovations that are racing to keep up with renewable expansion. There's also the nuclear question. As some leaders push for new reactors, critics like Ed Davey argue the focus should be firmly on wind and solar, which are faster, cleaner, and cheaper to deploy. Nuclear energy's challenges, slow construction, high costs, and the thorny legacy of radioactive waste mean it's unlikely to deliver solutions at the speed and scale required. Yet perhaps the most underrated risk is social. Unlike offshore turbines, onshore wind is visible, tangible, and sometimes controversial. Community buy-in is crucial. Experts from Renewable UK and energy CEOs like Greg Jackson insist community engagement funds and transparent decision-making are the keys to winning hearts and minds. If residents feel like partners rather than bystanders, the tide of opposition can be turned into a swell of support. So what are the practical lessons here? Why should you, watching this right now, care about a wind farm hundreds of miles away? First, energy independence isn't just a government buzzword, it's about our everyday lives. The war in Ukraine and global gas market shocks have shown how sudden price spikes can rock bills overnight. Homegrown renewables, wind especially, offer a buffer against those storms. When Britain harnesses its own resources, it keeps more money and control at home. Second, the economic ripple effect is enormous. Every wind farm like Strathy South brings jobs, not just in construction, but long-term roles in maintenance, engineering, grid management. If you live in a region eyed for wind development, opportunities may soon arrive on your doorstep. Local businesses, from transport to hospitality, often benefit from the influx of workers and investment. There's also the community benefit funds, millions of pounds annually, channeled into local projects, schools, infrastructure, and environmental improvements. These funds aren't just corporate charity, they're recognition that renewable energy is most powerful when it uplifts the communities at its heart. Perhaps your village hall's next refurbishment, or your children's after-school program, could be powered in part by wind. But there's a lesson in vigilance, too. Many of these benefits only materialize if projects stay on track. Planning input matters, so if your region faces a new wind proposal, your local council and consultation process are your arena. Get involved, ask tough questions about environmental impacts, about construction jobs promised, about how funds will be invested. Democracy doesn't end at the ballot box, it lives in every community meeting. And as a consumer, the choices you make ripple outwards. Switching to green tariffs, supporting political candidates who champion renewables, joining local environmental groups, all these actions help tip the scales. The UK's energy transition isn't just decided in Parliament or boardrooms, it's powered by millions of everyday decisions. Looking ahead, technological innovation is a wild card, one that could supercharge the wind revolution. The next generation of turbines, like the Vestas models set for Strathy South, are bigger, quieter, more bird-friendly, and far more efficient. Energy storage breakthroughs could smooth out the lulls and surges that once plagued wind power, making renewables a truly reliable backbone for the national grid. But the clock is ticking. The window for action is narrow. As Dara Vyas of Energy UK recently noted, meeting our clean power goals requires tackling barriers and delays head-on, speeding up planning, grid connections, and community engagement. If the system fails to adapt, Britain could see a surge of projects, and a surge of disappointment if they never reach fruition. Perhaps the most powerful takeaway is this: the wind revolution is not just about turbines on the horizon. It's about what kind of future Britain wants to build. One braced for another century of fossil-fueled uncertainty, or one where clean energy, local benefits, and national security go hand in hand. So, returning to the question, can Britain's wind revolution overcome its challenges to deliver real economic and environmental benefits, or are its promises at risk of unraveling? The truth is, both futures are still in play. The Strathy South wind farm and hundreds like it are proof of what's possible. If planning and grid delays are slashed, if public engagement is prioritized, if storage keeps up with supply, Britain is on the verge of an energy transformation that could echo for generations. Clean power, lower bills, stronger communities. These aren't just dreams, they're plans on the table, waiting to be realized. But if business as usual prevails, if bureaucracy stifles progress and communities aren't brought on board, it's easy to see how some promises could unravel. Empty turbines on the Scottish moors would become a monument to missed opportunity. The secret fact? While wind farms are often seen as dividing rural and urban communities, new polling shows a majority, over 65%, of British rural residents actually support local wind projects if they see direct community benefits. The narrative of opposition is real, but far from universal. With the right engagement, the silent majority can become the wind revolution's strongest allies. So, what can you do? Stay informed. Take part in local debates. Hold leaders and companies accountable, pushing for transparency and fairness in new energy plans. And remember, the wind revolution isn't happening to us. It's happening with us, or not at all. If you found this story illuminating, hit like, subscribe for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world, and share your thoughts below.